The message came before sunrise, when the world still felt quiet and honest. Daniel was standing in his kitchen, barefoot on the cold floor, waiting for the coffee to brew. His phone buzzed once on the counter. He almost ignored it. Then he saw the sender's name and felt a strange tightening in his chest. Marcus never messaged this early. Daniel wiped his hands, picked up the phone, and read the words that would split his life in two. The company had been sold. Papers signed, ownership transferred. Everything done legally, cleanly, and without him. Daniel stared at the screen as if it might change. 8 years of work vanished in a few lines of text. He reread it slowly, then again, hoping he misunderstood. He hadn't. Marcus had sold their company to an outside group, cutting Daniel out completely. No warning, no discussion. It's just a decision made behind his back. The coffee machine clicked. Off. The smell filled the room, but Daniel felt nothing. His mind raced forward and backward at the same time. He remembered the night they first shook hands on the idea, sitting in a cramped apartment with cheap takeout and big dreams. He remembered telling Marcus about his father's illness, about the loans he had taken, about how this company was not just a job but a lifeline. Marcus had nodded, serious and loyal, promising they would succeed together or fail together. That promise meant nothing now. Daniel called him straight to voicemail. He called again. No answer. Outside, the sun began to rise, painting the sky. Soft orange, as if mocking him with its calm. The city was waking up, people moving toward their normal lives. While Daniel stood frozen, holding a phone that felt heavier by the second, he sank into a chair and tried to breathe. This wasn't just about money. The sale meant Marcus had taken control of Daniel's future without asking. Daniel had planned his life around the company. His debts, his family responsibilities, his sense of worth were all tied to it. Marcus knew that. Marcus had used that. By mid-morning, the details began to surface. Emails from lawyers. Notifications from accounts Daniel no longer had access to. Each message confirmed the truth. The sale was final. Marcus was unreachable. Daniel felt like a stranger watching his own life collapse from a distance. When Marcus finally called, his voice was calm, almost gentle. He spoke as if this were a business update, not a betrayal. He said the deal had come suddenly. He said it was too good to refuse. He said Daniel would understand once the shock passed. Daniel listened in silence, his fingers digging into the arm of the chair. You should be proud, Marcus added. We built something valuable. The word burned. Daniel asked why he hadn't been told. Marcus paused, then said the truth in a careful tone. He was afraid Daniel would slow things down, afraid emotions would complicate the process, afraid Daniel would say no. That fear was the final cut. Marcus hadn't just betrayed him. He had decided Daniel was a weakness. The call ended. Daniel sat alone, the room suddenly too quiet. Anger did not explode inside him. It settled. It became sharp and focused. Betrayal did that. It stripped away noise and left only meaning. The rest of the day passed in fragments. Daniel drove without remembering the roads. He answered calls without hearing the words. Everywhere he went, memories followed him. The office where they worked late nights. The whiteboard filled with plans written in Marcus's handwriting. The shared jokes, the arguments, the belief that trust made them stronger. Trust had made him blind. That evening, Daniel visited his father in the hospital. He watched the old man sleep, breathing shallow but steady. This company had been Daniel's promise to him. A way to make the struggle worth it. Standing there, Daniel felt something shift inside him. Sadness hardened into resolve. Marcus had not just taken a business. He had taken time, hope, and dignity. On the walk home, Daniel replayed every conversation he'd ever had with Marcus, searching for signs he missed. He saw them now, the subtle impatience. The way Marcus spoke about risk and reward, always separating emotion from decision. Daniel had admired that strength. He understood now that it came with a cost. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He sat at his desk, laptop open, documents spread around him. He began to trace the story of the company, not with nostalgia, but with precision. He noted dates, decisions, signatures. He remembered who handled what, who trusted whom. He wasn't planning anything yet. He was learning, understanding. By morning, the shock had faded. In its place was clarity. Marcus believed he had won because he moved first. He believed speed was power. Daniel saw something else. He saw gaps. He saw consequences that Marcus had not considered because he believed himself justified. Daniel looked at his reflection in the dark screen of the laptop. He barely recognized himself. The man staring back was quieter, sharper, and deeply awake. He realized that betrayal changes you not by what it takes, but by what it reveals. Revenge did not feel wild or dramatic. It felt calm, like a door opening inside his mind. He closed the laptop and stood up. Outside, the city was fully awake now, moving fast, unaware of the war that had just begun in one man's heart. Daniel knew this was only the beginning. Betrayal had drawn the line. What came next would decide who he became. And for the first time since reading that message, Daniel allowed himself a thin, determined smile. Daniel did not rush. That was the first lesson he taught himself after the betrayal. Speed had been Marcus's weapon, not his. Daniel moved carefully now, letting each day sharpen his focus. On the outside, his life looked smaller. No office to go to, no meetings, no staff calling his name. But inside, everything was expanding. His thoughts ran fast and clear, lining up like pieces on a board. He started by listening. Former partners, minor investors, old clients. People talked more than they realized when they thought the story was already over. Daniel heard how Marcus explained the sale. He called it bold, necessary, a move made under pressure. He said Daniel would eventually thank him. Daniel noted every word, not with anger, but with interest. Marcus believed his own story. That belief made him careless. At night, Daniel read contracts until his eyes burned. He followed trails Marcus assumed were buried. He learned how the sale was structured, who benefited most, and who carried the hidden risks. The deeper he went, the more he saw the truth. Marcus had won fast money, but he had tied himself to people who cared only about profit, not loyalty. Daniel understood that world. He had avoided it on purpose before. Now he studied it like a language he once refused to learn. Still, doubt followed him. It crept in during quiet moments, when the city slowed and his mind wandered. He asked himself what revenge would really give him. Would it bring back the years he lost? Would it heal the damage to his family? Or would it turn him into someone he no longer respected? These questions had no easy answers, and Daniel didn't try to force them away. He let them stay heavy and real. One evening, he ran into Marcus by chance at a cafe. Marcus looked confident, well-dressed, relaxed. He smiled as if nothing had changed. They exchanged polite words. Kusa spoke about future plans, new projects, bigger goals. He sounded free. Daniel listened, studying his face. For the first time, he noticed small cracks, a slight tension in the eyes, a pause before certain answers. Marcus was winning, but he was also running. After they parted, Daniel sat alone, staring at his untouched drink. He felt no urge to confront Marcus, no desire to shout or accuse. That moment confirmed something important. Revenge was not about noise. It was about control, and control came from patience. Days turned into weeks. Daniel began rebuilding his routine. He exercised in the mornings, not to distract himself, but to clear his mind. He met people for coffee, not to complain, but to observe. Every conversation taught him something about how power worked, how trust was used. how people justified their choices when they thought they were right. He learned how Marcus defended himself in private. Marcus told himself Daniel was too emotional, too cautious, too tied to the past. He believed he had outgrown him. That belief protected Marcus from guilt. It also blinded him. People who believe they are right stop looking over their shoulder. Daniel felt the pull of revenge grow stronger as his understanding deepened. Saw exactly how to strike. He could expose weaknesses, trigger consequences, and let the system punish Marcus in ways that felt clean and legal. The plan formed naturally, step by step. It didn't excite him, steadied him. Yet, every time he imagined the final outcome, a strange emptiness followed. He pictured Marcus's fall, the shock, the realization. He expected satisfaction. Instead, he felt tired. He wondered if revenge was just another way of staying tied to the past. The conflict inside him sharpened. Part of him wanted justice, not the kind written in contracts, but the kind felt in the chest. Another part wanted peace, a future untouched by what Marcus had done. These two desires pulled against each other, equal and strong. One night, Daniel sat alone in his apartment, lights off, city noise drifting through the window. He thought about who he had been before the company, before Marcus. He remembered simpler goals, stability, meaning, he asked himself. Whether revenge would move him closer to those things or further away. At the same time, he could not ignore the truth. Walking away without response felt like surrender. Marcus had acted without consequence. That fact burned. Daniel didn't want destruction. He wanted balance. He wanted to prove that actions mattered. The next day, Daniel made a decision, not final, but directional. He would continue preparing. Knowledge was not a crime. Understanding was not revenge. He gave himself permission to plan without promising himself he would act. As he moved forward, he noticed changes in himself. He spoke less, listened more. He trusted instinct over hope. He no longer believed effort alone earned loyalty. These lessons were sharp, but useful. Betrayal had educated him in ways success never did. Meanwhile, Marcus grew louder. His success fed his confidence. He appeared in articles, spoke at events, shared his story freely. He painted himself as a risk-taker who had outgrown limitations. Daniel watched from a distance, noting how often Marcus mentioned freedom, speed, and courage. Rarely did he mention people. The contrast became clear. Marcus saw life as a race. Daniel began to see it as a long game. As weeks passed, Daniel felt himself nearing a point of no return. The plan was nearly complete. All that remained was choice. Carry it out or step away. Both paths demanded strength. Both carried loss. On the final night before his decision, Daniel slept for the first time in months without waking. In his dreams, he wasn't angry or victorious. He was simply walking forward, alone, steady, unburdened. When morning came, he woke with calm clarity. The conflict was still there, but it no longer controlled him. He understood now that revenge was not just about hurting someone else. It was about deciding what kind of person he would be after the hurt was done. Part 2 ended not with action, but with readiness. Daniel stood at the edge of his choice, fully aware of the cost on both sides, knowing that whatever he did next would define more than just the outcome. It would define him. Daniel woke before the alarm, heart steady, mind clear. The choice he had been circling for months now stood directly in front of him. There was no anger left to guide him, no confusion to slow him down, only truth. He showered, dressed simply, and left the apartment without looking back. The city felt different that morning, sharper and more real, as if it knew something important was about to end. He carried everything he needed in his mind. Names, timelines, proof. One call could begin it all. One email could set consequences in motion that Marcus would not escape. Daniel walked toward the office building where Marcus now worked, the glass tower rising like a symbol of speed and success. He stopped across the street and watched people rush in, chasing goals that looked solid but could vanish overnight. Inside that building, Marcus was preparing for a presentation. Daniel knew the schedule. He knew the pressure Marcus was under, the promises he had made, the fragile balance holding his new life together. Daniel imagined stepping forward, pressing the final button, and watching that balance break. The image was vivid. It felt possible. It felt earned. For a moment, Daniel allowed himself to feel it fully. The power, the justice, the idea that betrayal would finally have a cost. His hand tightened around his phone. Then something unexpected happened. He thought of his father's quiet smile the last time they spoke. He thought of the nights he sat alone, learning, growing sharper, becoming someone stronger than before. He realized that version of himself did not need this final act to be complete. Daniel crossed the street but did not enter the building. Instead, he sat on a bench nearby and watched the doors open and close. He thought about Marcus, not as an enemy, but as a man who chose speed over care. A man who believed winning meant leaving others behind. Daniel saw clearly now that Marcus would always live that way, chasing the next escape, the next advantage. Revenge would not change that. Daniel stood up and made a different call. It's not the one that would destroy, but the one that would release him. He closed the paths he had prepared, stepped away from the edge he had walked for so long. The decision felt heavy at first, then strangely light. Days passed, then weeks. Life did not magically improve. Healing was slower than revenge would have been. But it was real. Daniel focused on rebuilding, not what was taken, but what remained. His skills, his patience, his values. He started small projects, chose partners carefully, trusted slowly. News about Marcus reached him through others. The fast success began to crack. Deals rushed, promises stretched too thin. The same traits that drove Marcus forward now pulled him apart. Daniel felt no satisfaction, only understanding. Consequences had arrived without his help. One afternoon, Daniel received a message from Marcus. Short, honest. Marcus admitted things had gone wrong. He said he thought control would protect him. He was wrong. There was no apology, just truth. Daniel read it once and did not reply. He didn't need to. Standing by his window that evening, Daniel reflected on everything that had happened. Betrayal had broken him open, but it had also stripped away illusions. Revenge had tempted him, promised closure, promised balance. But walking away had given him something quieter and stronger, peace. Daniel understood now that revenge keeps. You tied to the moment you were hurt. Letting go does not erase the pain, but it gives you permission to move forward. He chose to be defined not by what was taken from him, but by what he refused to become. The city lights came on one by one. Life continued, steady and imperfect. Daniel closed the window, turned away, and stepped into a future shaped not by vengeance, but by choice.